We're recording. You want to do the sync clap?
Yeah. Okay.
3, 2, 1.
I love that.
Okay. Hi there, and welcome back to Season 3 of Sciverse. You're listening to a podcast all about science, popular culture, and entertainment. This podcast is for everyone, no matter if you're an aspiring podcaster, a producer, or a placemaker. We are your hosts, Ella.
And Isabel, two science communicators and solarpunk enthusiasts taking this podcast on a journey into hopeful futures. This episode, Solarpunk Australia.
Woo!
So for our final episode of Season 3, we're going to be diving into all the amazing and radically sustainable things going on around this country and why Australia has potential as a solarpunk superpower.
Wow, I'm really excited for this episode. So keen. But before we dive into it, it's really important that we acknowledge that this live episode of Sciverse is being recorded on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. Dowra Nuna, Dowra Ngunnawal, Yungu, Nali Manyin, Duni Manyin, Ngunnawal Wari, Dowwa Wari, Dindi, Wangirilijin Yin. This is Ngunnawal country. Today we are all meeting together on Ngunnawal country. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the elders. We extend those respects to all traditional custodians of the land you're listening to this episode on. We acknowledge any traditional custodians in the room with us. And if you don't know whose lands you are on, today is a really great day to find out and connect in with that culture and country.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And on that note, I wanted to add, because of the topic we're talking about today, that a true solarpunk future in Australia can't happen without reconciliation, without truth-telling and valuing and centering Indigenous knowledges and voices. And an Australian solarpunk future only works if we build those bridges, and that starts with learning whose lands you're on. And so without further ado, let's start talking about Solarpunk Australia.
Okay,
Ella.
let's go.
So we've kind of been hinting at this episode since the end of Season 2, I think, when we talked about energy heroes and future cars in Australia with our friend Isaac Martin. So if you're interested in that, go check out that episode. And we've also been hinting at this episode all throughout this season in various formats. Because we love to share Australian stories, and they're amazing and they don't get enough attention beyond our local news cycles. And though the topic of Solarpunk Australia is, we thought the topic is a perfect one to end on for this season, especially as Australia has so much potential as a sustainability leader and powerhouse, as you'll learn about all throughout this episode. We really have all the ingredients ready-made. And what better place to share these local stories than at the lovely third place of the Woden Library.
Back again.
Yes, it's so great to be back here. We recorded an earlier episode of this season on the science of community and third places here. And yeah, it's great to be back here and have a live audience again.
Yeah. And so today we're going to be talking about solarpunk technologies, communities and culture all around Australia. And because we're doing another live show, we thought let's make this interactive for people who are here in front of us, but also if you're listening to this back, we have an interactive element today. So we have a Solarpunk in Australia bingo for this episode. So feel free to download that if you're listening and play along with us and send us what timestamp you get 5 in a row on where your bingo is.
Yes, please do. And just before we get into the content, I want to do a quick Solarpunk recap of those who are new to the concept. We've both thrown the word around a few times.
About 20 times in the first 4 minutes of this podcast.
Yes.
So let's talk about what that is.
Yeah, let's talk about what it is. So it's essentially a movement, a genre, an aesthetic that envisions a hopeful and radically sustainable future where humans, technologies, and the natural environment live in harmony. It's an alternative to dystopian visions of the future. It's about using technology and existing diverse knowledges to create a brighter future, and one that's close, not hundreds or thousands of years away like a lot of other science fiction worlds. So you might have seen glimpses of solarpunk in pop culture, like Studio Ghibli movies, like Black Panther's Wakanda world, even in Lego Friends and eco expansion packs for games like The Sims.
So it's getting out there, and it's in a few spaces, and we can start to understand why this might be a desirable movement and idea for a lot of people. It obviously is for us. That's why I've done a whole season focused on solarpunk.
Yes.
So with all of that in mind, we're going to dive into this episode, which, as all our episodes are, pretty much divided into 3 parts.
Yes.
And this first part, Isabel.
So the first part, we're going to be talking about solarpunk technologies in Australia. And so like I'm sure a lot of you listening to this podcast and a lot of you in the room today know Australia is diverse in energy opportunities.
Oh, yeah.
Which allows for a resilient, distributed, renewable system, which is actually a really important part of solarpunk living because it means there's no single point of failure or any centralized control. And there's a really great book by an academic we know, Bjorn Sternberg,
who's an ACT academic.
His book, Amy's Balancing Act, explores all of these concepts through a fable format. So we recommend that if you want more information about stabilizing the grid and the energy around that. But I wanted to start by talking about the electricity industry in Australia and how it's transformed over just over the last 20 years, driven by the rise in household solar and other renewable energy sources. And again, a lot of you listening to this podcast or in the room today probably have some form of solar energy that you're using in your house and other renewable energy sources. So around Australia today, we have established hydropower in places like Tasmania and the Snowy Mountains.
Love the snowy hydro.
Yes. So for those who don't know, hydropower is essentially renewable energy that generates electricity from the force of moving water, like rivers or waterfalls, from dams to power turbines. And in Tasmania, fun fact, around 80% of the state's electricity comes from hydropower.
Ooh.
Pretty cool. The other thing we have in Australia is strong wind corridors.
We're one of the windiest places on Earth.
We are.
Yeah.
And particularly in places like South Australia and Victoria. And this is alongside emerging wave and offshore wind power. So wind energy is another cornerstone of Australia's renewable sector, generating over 30% of our clean energy and over 13% of our electricity as of 2024. And of course, we have to talk about the sun. We have an abundance of solar power in Australia. Sun is such a huge part of our cultural identity because we have so much of it, which makes us particularly solarpunk aligned.
What's that phrase? Sunburnt country?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have the Sunshine State too.
Sunshine
Queensland.
State.
So we're actually the global leader in adoption of rooftop solar per capita, with about 1 in 3 homes equipped with solar panels. So that's pretty cool.
So kind of like 1 in 3 homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Homeowners. So ask your friends, see who has it. It's pretty popular, and Canberra specifically, we have a high uptake as well. I wanted to jump in with some CSIRO research from 2023 by Graham and Havas, which forecasts Australia to have the world's 3rd cheapest renewable power in about 14 to 24 years relative to other regions. So scientific modelling has shown that our renewable power and energy will be particularly cheap, especially when compared to many of our neighbours and trading partners, which includes the Southeast Asia region primarily. So not only do we have an abundance of this, but because of that, we're going to have some of the cheapest energy forecasted, in within the next 2 decades, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And we're just getting started talking about solarpunk technologies in Australia, because I now wanted to move to all of the community-owned solar farms we have around the country. So this is another thing that makes us particularly Solarpunk, because it's got the community focus and it's all about people power. So community solar farms are smaller, locally initiated projects. It's an alternative to those sort of larger scale government projects on energy like the Snowy Hydro, which we talked about before. And with these community projects, residents often purchase shares and receive direct financial returns or lower energy bills from being part of it. So the major benefits of this are that it lets locals be a part of the energy transition and decision making, and also really empowers people who are renters, apartment dwellers, and those without suitable roofs to participate in solar energy, because not everybody is actually able to do that. So one of the most prominent community solar farms was actually opened in March this year.
And it's pretty close, right?
It's very close. It's in Goulburn. In New South Wales. It can power about 500 homes. It's owned by almost 300 local investors, so people who live there, who have invested anything ranging from $400 for a single panel all the way up to 100,000 Australian dollars. And some of these profits are actually diverted to pay the power bills of struggling people living in Goulburn.
Now that's community.
Yes.
Very Solarpunk.
Yes. And the other thing about it is that the facility itself runs as a cooperative democratic model where every investor, no matter how much they've contributed to the project, gets an equal say in how the solar farm is run, which is something that also makes it extra Solarpunk.
Yeah.
Another example of a community solar farm is actually right here in Canberra in Majura, which powers around 260 homes in the ACT. And this farm has been operating since 2021 and has offsetted over 5,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide so far.
Whoa, that's huge.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And this one, again, it runs in a similar way to the Goulburn farm, and the local investors are super engaged. They visit the farm and they participate in tours and working bees for tree planting and grounds maintenance. So again, really building community there.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to transition us away from talking about, pure sustainable energy, which I think is a pretty fundamental leap in the Solarpunk movement, to something that might be a little bit left from center that you may not think of as Solarpunk, but I think really fits particularly that DIY and punkification and, reusing and recycling aspect. And going from clean energy to the opposite, let's talk solarpunking it up with what is left behind in mining towns. So there is this thing called broken hill string that we found out about from one of our friends, Mark Thompson, who is a brilliant Australian inventor and designer and tinkerer extraordinaire. And this is what he says about it. He says, "I've been on the track of broken hill string, which is the wire used in the local mines to set off explosives. Once used, it's often discarded and taken home by miners who find literally hundreds of uses for it. It's a sort of predecessor to cable ties. And he found that there's a great sense of pride in local resourcefulness here, and a slight annoyance from the older miners that Mark spoke about, who talk about the general wastefulness of modern life. So in Broken Hill, people are using these old discarded mine wire to lace up shoes, to tie things to farm gates, to literally do so many different things with. And it's really going into that repair and recycling aspect that we love about Solarpunk, that uses materials we already have in another way. And lots of these building techniques are really quite clever. And this kind of got me thinking about Australian practices of repurposing string and how they can be linked all the way from our first people's fibercraft, where string is twisted, braided, and woven out of plant materials, and it becomes really durable, And, you can link it to even modern hay bale twine, the twine that's, surrounds and keeps hay bales compact, which I've seen used for literally almost anything on farms. Like if you can use hay bale twine for it, you will, because it's free and you always have it with you. I've also seen recently people repurpose guitar strings. Sometimes they turn them into jewelry because, kind of once they snap, they're no good for guitars. And I even saw a story about repurposing of string recently in the ABC. So get this, there's a woman in Victoria who turns and collects all of her tea bag strings and she knits them into scarves.
Oh.
That's incredible. And I just think, this reusing and repurposing is the type of solarpunk creativity that I love to see. And I think, that's quite an Australian link specifically to string throughout hundreds of years. So that was quite a cool connection.
Yeah, that's a great one. And yeah, the repurposing, the upcycling is a very solarpunk thing because of the DIY, because of finding new ways of using technologies that we don't need anymore, have lost their original purpose. Yeah, that's super cool, especially the tea bag.
Yeah.
one. That would take such a long time though.
Yeah, but think about how many cups of tea we drink between us.
That's true, yeah.
You would have so many tea bag strings so quickly.
Yeah.
Depending, how many cups a day you have. And then maybe it even reinforces you drinking more because you can repurpose the strings.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I love that you found a link to tea somehow.
Look, if it can be done, I'll do it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I've got another kind of solar technology in Australia that I wanted to talk about that I think everybody's going to love.
And some of you might even have in your backyards right now.
Yes, which is the Hills Hoist clothesline. So this might not sound solarpunk at first, but hear us out. Using a clothesline and the sun and wind exposure to dry your laundry is actually still a radical idea for other parts of the world.
Which is crazy to me.
Yes. So, for example, in places like North America, where clothes dryers are still relied on all year round, and so it is a weird concept to be hanging up your laundry outside to dry in the sun.
I have seen a piece from Oprah where she presents solar drying as this new type of technology to try and excite people to hang their stuff, up in their gardens or on their balconies. And I remember watching it as a child and I was like, Mum, why are they pretending like this is a new idea? But, culturally, I think in Australia we're quite used to hanging things outside in part because the Hills Hoist is so iconic.
Yes, yeah. So using a clothesline is completely normalized here and you're honestly seen as kind of weird if you don't use one and if you don't hang up your laundry. And it's one of those examples of solarpunk where you're finding a way to work with nature as well and not against it. So how are some other ways you can use the sun and the wind to help you? And the Hills Hoist design is one of Australia's most recognisable pop culture icons. It's used frequently as a metaphor for Australian suburbia, so much so that it's now actually listed as a national treasure by the National Library of Australia.
Wow.
And I also wanted to mention here something that I only discovered recently is its iconic appearance at the 2000 Sydney Olympics during the closing ceremony, I believe, which featured giant roaming Hills Hoist robots throughout the ceremony. And that brought that to the rest of the world because, everybody who was watching the Olympics. And I really think alongside the sun, the Hills Hoist could be considered a symbol of Australian solarpunk.
And the Hills Hoist that I grew up with was even green and gold, like green and yellow. So it was even in green, Australiana colours, which is so funny.
Yes.
And I also wanted to add that I recently found out in Scotland they call them whirligigs. How fun and delightful is that name?
Yeah, I like that. Very whimsical.
Very whimsical.
I mean, they are whimsical too.
Just putting the clothes out on the whirligig. That would make me want to use it more. So I think if we need to start a campaign, that's what we can build off of.
Yeah, no, that's great. so thinking about some sort of other solarpunk technologies in Australia, I wanted to talk about architecture.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So we talked a little bit about something called Earthship architecture in our Solarpunk systems episode. So check out that episode for more, especially if you want a good deep dive and background on what Solarpunk is too. But Earthship architecture, cool sounding name. It's basically a passive solar earth shelter made of natural and upcycled materials and designed to withstand extreme temperatures. The great thing about them is that these sort of Earthship homes are cheaper to run, less susceptible to water and power outages because they're off-grid. And like I said, the materials used also increase their resilience to natural disasters. And I'm going to paint a bit of a picture of what they look like for you since I can't show you a visual. And this is
Why did we choose an audio format?
I know, we always have this problem every time. But they kind of look like Hobbit holes meets Tatooine homes. So like Lord of the Rings plus Star Wars.
But the ultimate pop culture mashup.
Yes.
Awesome.
And we actually have a few examples of Earthship homes around Australia. They're still very new, but there are a few around the country. So the first Earthship home in Australia with council permission was completed 10 years ago in 2016, just a 40-minute drive southeast of Adelaide in South Australia. And there are actually lots of cool elements about this particular home. The first one is that the architects actually built it as a living laboratory for gaining knowledge about the possibilities of sustainable housing. So it's a bed and breakfast open to anybody who wants to experience Earthship and
Surely we
housing.
go. Surely we go.
I know.
What are you doing after this?
And when you live in there, you can help with the research around sustainable living, which is led by the architect Dr. Martin Freeney, and he has a PhD in architecture and the built environment, so extremely qualified for this sort of work. And he publishes the research and makes it accessible for everybody to enjoy. So he's not gatekeeping the knowledge. He wants everybody to learn about the research. And this particular house is made from earth, used tires, and recycled bottles and cans. And these are all sort of stuck together with terracotta clay, I think. And most of the builders were volunteers from all around Australia and the world as well.
It's like a community that comes together to put these up. And if you have
Yes.
experience in it, you'd like to go around and make more of them with other people and encourage others into this community, right?
Yeah, exactly. And everybody who was coming, most of them actually didn't have much building experience at all. They just wanted to be part of it, and they really had a passion to try something new and connect with people and encourage sustainable living and innovation, which is what Solarpunk is all about. Another example of this sort of architecture is more recently in July 2025, so last year, a couple in Tasmania built 2 Earthship houses with recycled bottles and help from a whole bunch of strangers. And this couple, Matt and Kate, they did this because they actually couldn't afford housing in Melbourne and realised how much money they could save by building off-grid and by using Earthship-inspired designs. Their Earthships were actually also designed by Dr. Martin Freeney, so the guy who made the South Australian Earthship. And his designs were also, importantly, adapted to feel more modern and fit the climate of Tasmania, which is much
Very different. Yeah.
It's a lot cooler than South Australia. So instead they used a concrete foundation instead of earth for the floor so that it would retain more heat. And they also used rammed earth walls instead of the soil-filled tires that are usually used for the Earthships. The houses also have a sunroom that doubles as a fruit and veg greenhouse fed by recycled grey water, so that's leftover water from sinks, showers and more, and also has a solar system and water tanks.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
High tech, low tech.
Yes. Yeah. And there's also some Earthship homes in a New South Wales village, which actually brings us to our next section.
Okay.
Which is all about solarpunk communities.
So we're moving away from individual aspects of the technology that we see in Australia to the communities that kind of surround and build them.
Yes. Yeah. So we have budding solarpunk communities all around Australia. These are communities that aim to be more environmentally and socially sustainable as a whole, and they incorporate some of the technology and architecture we've talked about so far, plus more solarpunk elements.
Yeah. So let's start about talking about solarpunk communities with the broadest community we have in Australia, which is the whole country, and the community of everyone who lives here. So Australia, you may or may not know, we are currently targeting to reach net zero emissions by 2050, and we have a halfway target kind of reducing our emissions by between 62 to 70% by 2035. So, only less than a decade away now. And our government says that this is both achievable and ambitious. And they say it's achievable because we've got pretty good policy foundations, because we have the natural energy resources we touched on earlier, the sun, the wind. It's achievable because we have the critical minerals needed for clean technology infrastructure and technologies, kind of like we spoke about earlier with the batteries. And we also have technologies like solar panels, wind farms as well to back that up. And our Australian net zero plan identifies 5 priorities to guide our transition to net zero. And they've done this with the acronym CLEAN, which I just think is something nice they threw in for us. They didn't need to. So this acronym CLEAN includes clean electricity across the economy, lowering emissions by electrification and efficiency, expanding clean fuel use, accelerating new technologies, and net carbon removals scaled up. I think they really, really struggled with that last one.
I can tell.
And these are all really great in theory, how that's driving, the whole community of Australia here. But some of the ways that we will achieve net zero are yet to be concretely mapped out. And there's still some reliance on carbon offsetting credits. And it also, all of our plans exclude international shipping and aviation. So it's looking good, but there is still a lot of work here to be done for Australia to be net zero, sustainable and solarpunk. But there is lots of hope because these are great foundations.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And so that's kind of Australia
As a
broadly, the whole country.
Let's zoom in.
Let's zoom in. And we're going to start by zooming in to New South Wales, like I briefly mentioned before. So there is a solarpunk community in a place called the Narara Eco Village in the central coast of New South Wales. And this village has Earthship architecture, like we talked about before, alongside other sustainable housing with solar panels connected to a smart grid and a battery to store and use excess power. It's a small community and it's made up of around 235 people aged from newborn baby all the way up to 80 years old, and includes plumbers, bankers, property valuers, landscapers, social workers, midwives, and various other career professionals. So their aim essentially is to, quote, nurture a resilient and inclusive intergenerational community that inspires collaboration, innovation and fun, to live with kindness, aware of our interdependence with others and the natural world, and to learn and demonstrate ways to thrive within the Earth's ecological capacity, drawing on Indigenous wisdom and fostering regenerative environmental, social and economic practices.
Sounds like a cool place to live.
Yeah, very solarpunk. They call themselves a sociocracy, which is a new word for me.
Tell me more about that.
But it's basically a transparent and consent-based governance model that distributes power through linked self-organization self-organizing circles rather than top-down hierarchy. And so they basically meet regularly in these circles and go around the circle and talk about ideas. And they can share why you agree, why you disagree, and there's always an opportunity for people to voice their opinions about things without being judged. And this is also a quote from them. They say, quote, "The pattern is more like a flower than a pyramid, with interconnected circles passing information and feedback between different areas of responsibility, from the board making legally binding policy decisions to a working group managing day-to-day issues, such as the market stall at a village day." So like I said, everyone has an opportunity to contribute their ideas or critiques, and the community seeks solutions that are quote unquote good enough for now and support an agreed vision, which is a sustainable world, rather than an individual preference. So again, very solarpunk.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love that specifically because solarpunk is all about a better tomorrow. It's not like a better 40 years in the future in a way that we can't even imagine with tools we can't imagine. It's supposed to be like what is the best we can do with what we have now, and starting from this point, which is why reuse and DIY is such a big part of it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to jump back onto community batteries because you mentioned this was something this community did.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of looking about Australia's use of home batteries because we have a really good thing going on socially and culturally right now. So the Clean Energy Council Australia reports that 183,245 batteries were sold, these are home batteries, were sold in the second half of 2025. So that's just 6 months.
Wow. That's a lot.
Over 180,000. This figure for the 6-month period is more than the previous 4 years combined.
Okay.
So there's a lot of momentum gathering here. And though this community, sounds like they're all really into it and they're coming together collectively, we're starting to see lots of movements in this direction all around Australia as well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out because that number to me was astonishing and very exciting.
Yeah, that's super cool. And it will probably get bigger as well, and more exponential. I do have another solarpunk community. This one is in Queensland.
Okay, I love this little trip we're doing around Australia.
Yeah, so in the Sunshine Coast, it's called Crystal Waters. It's an eco-village. It's actually Australia's longest running permaculture community.
Okay.
So it's been running for nearly 40 years.
And what's permaculture again?
So permaculture is a type of regenerative agriculture that focuses on working with nature rather than against it. So very solarpunk, and also focused on observing natural patterns to then inspire efficient and self-sustaining systems, especially ones where waste from one component can become fuel for another. So things like composting to reduce energy and labour. So that's sort of a quick explanation of what permaculture is.
Nice.
So again, it's a small village. It has about 250 residents.
That number is very similar to the last one. The last one was 235 people.
Yeah.
That makes me think of, have you heard of that theory that the size of the human brain correlates with how many friends we can have, and that kind of evens out to about 250? And there was a study done a few years ago where 250 was the average amount of Facebook friends.
Oh my gosh.
And they calculated that based on like cranial capacity.
So maybe there's something in that, and that's like the number. That's the perfect number to have these little eco villages.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I think you're onto something.
Okay. More investigation to happen here.
Yeah. Something I wanted to point out about this eco village is that only 20% of the land is actually taken up by residential lots. And so the remaining 80% is regenerative forests and common land people can license to do projects like micro dairies or bamboo farms or other sustainable DIY things they want to make come to life. It's also, fun fact, a wildlife sanctuary home to lots of kangaroos, wallabies, birds, reptiles, and they run several community events like monthly markets, music performances.
We have a
and
bingo,
concerts.
our first bingo.
Do we?
Yes. Has anyone else gotten bingo? Winner. Okay, that's a timestamp around 34. So listeners, if you've gotten one before now's the chance to comment in. But that's pretty exciting.
Oh my God, cool.
I thought it would happen when we had the animals. Oh, nice.
That's so cool.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
a sanctuary.
Yeah, so it's a sanctuary. It has lots of community events. Yeah, and I'm realizing these eco-villages, because of the names and also some of the language they use, can sound a little bit culty, but they are working towards something that's sustainable and solarpunk, and you can have good cults as well. Ones that are like not doing harm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I can go on a whole explanation of that, but we don't have time.
That's
to do
another
that.
episode.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's jump into, we've spoken a lot about place-based communities, and I want to talk about examples of virtual communities that, may have a physical aspect to them, but also kind of exist online, but are still kind of like uniquely Australian. They're not virtual as in whole of world.
Yeah.
So I know we've spoken about it a lot, but we've got this virtual community popping up in the gaming world with Loftia, which we've spoken about a lot. It's an upcoming Solarpunk MMO, so a massive multiplayer online game, and the co-developers from Cloud Games are Sydney-based. So I think we're going to see a big virtual Solarpunk gaming Australian community come, which is a lot of things, but that's really cool. I also recently heard about a NARM, or Melbourne Solarpunk meetup group, and they recently ran a Reclaiming the Internet for Humans session, which is really cool. And this event kind of collided physical and virtual solarpunk space. So meeting physically to work on making a better virtual and internet space. I really liked the sound of that. Another recent one I found out is Solarpunk and Solarpunk at Home are two recent artworks and experiences from this year, from 2026, choreographed by Jonathan Holmesy. And he described them as a choreographic gift to the city and to you, an invitation to put down your phone, dissolve fascism from your fassa, and lift westward towards the horizon. So it's like a dance performance that's done at sunset. And Solarpunk is a quartet that honours Melbourne's history of grassroots activism. And it happens at the Sculpture of the Great Petition by Susan Hewitt and Penelope Lee. And audiences are guided through movement studies and images, both very, very physically placed at that sculpture, but also at home. So that's just a really cool one too, where it's kind of incorporating your body in space as a form of activism. Another kind of solarpunk community that is both physical and virtual here in Canberra is the group Electrify Canberra. So they meet virtually, they plan physical events, and their whole thing is to help people electrify their home, reduce their carbon emissions, and save money on energy bills. And they're based on the Australia-wide movement Rewiring Australia. And I just think it's so cool that we have these incredible like community leaders, movers and makers here in Australia, because like we've touched on, we have a lot to get done. And some of these community groups are helping others do it, which is really cool. And I also wanted to speak about, I can't believe this was a shower thought last night. I was like, we have to include this in the episode. I want to talk about the physical and virtual communities we have here of science communicators and science communication. So we're science communicators. We have lots of famous ones in Australia, including Dr. Carl, Lee Constable, Kirsten Banks, and many more. And lots of these national and local science communicators have a really heavy environmental and sustainability focus, which I think a lot of scientists have, and a lot of science leading people have, and a lot of arts leading people too. And I want to talk about how cool it is that there's that real culture in Australia. And, you know, we have one of the leading universities on science communication here. There's got to be a reason. And I think it's priming Australia for a more sustainable and hopeful future.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, wow, I didn't even think about that, but you're so right.
I know.
So
I feel like we should have, happy we got to include that one. So that's
cool.
a bit of a mix between virtual and physical. Can we zoom in some more on Canberra?
Yes. Let's zoom in more on Canberra, where, again, we record this podcast at the moment. And I wanted to point out that Canberra is now powered by 100% renewable electricity, generated by a mix of wind and solar power. And just last year, Oxford Economics named us the best city in the world for quality of life.
Wow.
So,
good place to be, I think.
yep.
Nice.
We are also one of a handful of planned cities around the world. And this is something that if you're a Canberran, you know that this aspect of Canberra is often made fun of. And one of the big reasons some people call us boring, but it's actually a fact that makes us very solarpunk because of the way the city was planned. Because the key architects, who were Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Griffin, they planned the city to merge with the natural environment and have an abundance of trees and open green spaces and community assets. And their design was very intentional, and it was unconventional for the time. It was sustainable. It was forward thinking. And fun fact, because of this, Canberra is actually now the largest garden city in the world. So just by also using that word garden, it's making me think solarpunk, maybe? And also, we're literally the bush capital. So we're very lucky to be surrounded by so much nature here. And I think that really gives us, in particular, that solarpunk potential. And I wanted to zoom in a bit more, get even more specific in Canberra by talking about one of our sustainable communities, which is the Ginninderry region, which is a newer region of Canberra. It's made up of a few suburbs, but it's a 6-star green community.
It goes up to 6 stars.
Yeah.
Is it not a 5-star system?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Not for this one. Anyway, so it's the highest rating awarded by the Green Building Council of Australia. And Ginninderry, it's a growing region, and the vision is that one day it will become home for over 30,000 people. And residents who live there are given access to a range of incentives and rebates that help them reduce their energy bills and reliance on large heating and air conditioning units, grow their own food through plot-style community gardens and landscaping, and also access to free Wi-Fi in community centres, and create an overall affordable lifestyle. So it's got a lot of things going for it.
Yeah, I want to live there.
And every home, including those that haven't been built yet, are within a 5-minute walk of a park or open space. So we love a walkable community. I think this is another reason you would probably like living there. And it's planned so that residents have good public transport options and less reliance on driving cars. And so the layout of the roads and paths is very optimized for pedestrians, bikes, and buses with simple and direct routes, which is something else people talk about, say about Canberra, is how well it's designed for riding bikes. In 2022, the Ginninderry area actually opened Canberra's most sustainable demonstration home.
Oh, yeah.
Which had a passive solar design, double and triple glazed windows, energy and water efficient appliances, renewable energy systems, good draft ceiling and insulation.
Critical.
A grass driveway to help biodiversity and reduce the urban heat island effect, a kitchen made from recyclable products, and a climate-wise garden and green roof studio. So it's a very solarpunk aligned house.
And something I want to say on that too is like particularly like having the passive designs, having really good draft ceiling and insulation. It's not just good for the planet, but it reduces your energy bills so much, even if they are, you know, sustainable energy anyway. Like that's some of the best savings you can make.
Yes.
On your like monthly bills.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Shame it was only a demo home, but, it's...
First of many.
Yes.
Perhaps.
And in another Solarpunk move, Gin and Dairy are actually in the process of launching a tool library where residents can borrow tools and equipments like drills, gardening tools, sewing machines, and lots of other tools for low cost without needing to purchase them.
And store them.
Yes. And the concept of a tool library is also something that's very solarpunk and appears in lots of solarpunk stories and fiction. And speaking of tool libraries, here in Canberra, we also have something called the Canberra Community Toolbox, which is in Watson. It's a nonprofit, and it's essentially a equipment library offering hundreds of tools for activities like DIY and crafting and cooking. And for the cost of about one tool each year, so around $100, you get access to several more as needed rather than wasting it. And it's also great for people who live in small apartments where they might not be much storage space or they want to declutter. And this is my favorite part
Tell
of
me.
it. In October 2025, they launched a mobile tool library to provide broader access to their stock of tools and equipment so they basically can deliver it to people. So they're hoping to continue this depending on volunteer availability and demand. But I really love the accessibility aspect of this concept.
Yeah, and it's so great. And it's, community building. There's lots of that sharing. Because there are lots of tools that might sit in your house that you might only use a couple times a year that take up a lot of space that are really expensive that, if you share them and then they can get maintained and upgraded as needed and you can kind of get the best use case out of them. That sounds so smart and efficient as well as a really lovely way to connect with people. Yeah, I love that. And this concept of sharing and community and perhaps the culture, you could say it makes, leads us perfectly into the third section of our podcast. So we've transcended solarpunk technology, solarpunk community, and we're going to talk now about solarpunk culture in Australia. And so obviously, as we've demonstrated in, the last 47 minutes, there's so much going on in Australia that could be considered solarpunk or that's leading us towards that more solarpunk future. So let's look into the culture that makes that possible. And one of the things I wanted to start with are men's sheds, which is something we've spoken a lot about recently.
Yeah.
So men's sheds actually started in Australia in the 1990s. So community men's sheds first appeared here in the mid-1990s, and they were kind of set up as local centres of social support and connection for older men, and they revolved around normatively male-gendered activities such as woodworking and building. This model was so popular that nearly 1,000 sheds emerged over the first 20 years of them being set up, and that's now expanded internationally. And there's been a lot of research on this. That background was provided from a research article by Lee Boucher and Sophie Robinson from Australian Historical Studies. You may have heard of men's sheds, these places. It's kind of like a grassroots phenomena that started from providing a gender-conforming way for men to gather, work on their craft, and find social support in their local communities. And now many of these spaces are open to even wider audiences. Yeah. They've gone global, far outside of Australia. They're really, really popular. And some of these have even transformed or transitioned into a hackerspace kind of model. So hackerspaces, or as they're kind of known, I think to me and maybe to a few of us, makerspaces, are community and collaboration focused non-for-profit workspaces. Normally people here are united by a chosen physical craft or a set of physical crafts. So one of the ones that I know a lot about, they have so many 3D printers going all the way from like plastics up to like a clay 3D printer. And their community is really focused around that aspect. There are surprisingly lots of these hackerspaces or makerspaces around Australia. And I think this kind of speaks to the culture we have of making, creating, tinkering, and collaborating.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we do have that culture, and I think I'm going to talk about it a little bit later in this podcast episode of inventing and innovation. So I think to me it's not actually super surprising. And these hacker spaces and maker spaces are also open to everyone, right? So it's not just men.
So kind of like we went from men's spaces, men's sheds, sorry, they kind of evolved into perhaps not just for like older men, but then also children, and then there are women's sheds popping up, and now we have places that, you know, don't even consider gender as a part of that social space.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about how a specific aspect too of the men's shed is that social well-being and the mental health check-ins and providing a space for that. And I love that that this connection between DIY, doing things with your hands, and then collaborating with people and the benefits to you personally that brings. I think it's very solarpunk that it helps so much more than may first meet the eye. The ongoing impacts are so much wider.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, we can't really talk about culture in Australia without touching on our First Peoples.
Yeah.
And like we mentioned at the top of this episode, a true solarpunk future in Australia can't happen without reconciliation or truth-telling or centering Indigenous people. So First Nations culture, I think, is such an important and crucial aspect to understand. And when we talk about solarpunk, which is a reality that has harmony between environment, community, and technology, we're really talking about something that the First Peoples of Australia have been practicing for tens of thousands of years. And I think there's a lot of similarities here with care of country.
Yeah.
So Reconciliation Australia says that in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, the meaning of capital C country is more than just ownership or connection to land. And Professor Mike Dodson explains that when we talk about traditional country, we mean something beyond the dictionary definition of the word. We might mean homeland or tribal or clan area, and we might mean more than just a place on a map. For us, country is a word with all the values, places, resources, stories, and cultural obligations associated with that area and its features. It describes the entirety of our ancestral domains. While they may all no longer necessarily be the title holders to the land, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians are still connected to the country of their ancestors, and most consider themselves the custodians or caretakers of their land. And Ngunnawal elder Jude Barlow kind of sums it up when she says, country is everything. It's family, it's life, it's connection. And this kind of connecting of everything through and because of country is so powerful, particularly in like a solarpunk context. And it's a thinking that I'd love to see become more mainstream again rather than, you know, in the punk and like oppositional to the popular culture. And though it might seem really obvious to those in the room how custodianship of country relates to society and environment, the technology aspect here is so entwined as well.
It is, yes.
And Isabel, you and I, we often talk about Indigenous Australians as the first scientists, the first engineers, the first astronomers, and all the tools and technology that they invented to assist with caring for country are really important there for those, you know, scientists and astronomers and chemists kind of roles. And if you're interested in finding out more, Dr. Corey Tutt's picture book, The First Scientists, Deadly Inventions and Innovations from Australia's First Peoples, covers a broad range of sustainable and quality of life improving technologies, such as glue, skincare, paint preservers, bush ovens, eel traps, and controlled burns. So highly recommend. There's a lot of sustainable technology and culture there we can really learn from.
For the people in the live audience and also watching on YouTube, we actually have a copy of the book, a set decoration today.
So if people want to come read it after, highly recommend. Come have a flick through that. And here I wanted to bring up our only guest episode this season with Matthew Heffernan, where we talked about ochre punk and the importance of hopeful Indigenous stories. And we spoke there also about like repurposing and DIY out in the bush and how it's a little bit grungy. Like we're not imagining a clean white and green oval kind of future. We might be imagining a future a bit more like bush mechanics where you're out in the bush solving problems, DIYing. And we spoke a lot about how these stories are kind of needed, particularly with that First Nations lens on them. So a lot about it then, but I think, you know, can't talk about the culture in Australia without talking about the culture that, you know, we're building on now, even if it, you know, even if it doesn't seem like it's there sometimes.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I wanted to also touch on briefly Australian screen culture.
Yeah.
So seeming as we just brought up bush mechanics, I wanted to talk about, you know, what we may have seen, grown up with. And when I was thinking about Aussie screen culture, all I could think of was like the kid shows that I watched growing up and the Koala Brothers. And I know that that's like a British production, but there's that Australian setting and you've got, you know, they're out in the Australian bush. I feel like they always had problems with their plane that they were trying to solve. Like they had that DIY kind of element. Yeah. Another bingo. You're at 55 minutes in, which is great. So yeah, the Koala Brothers came to mind. I was thinking about it more, and then I thought about Tracey McBean, famous inventor, where she's kind of like this Australian child who's an inventor and is always trying to solve problems.
Oh, wait,
and
I think I do.
There's like the caravan that she builds in. Like that. I think that DIY and that resourcefulness is really apparent. Yeah. And even I wanted to touch on Play School with like its bush connections and sustainability. That's so highly educational as well. And, you know, we brought up science communicators earlier. Yeah. Education is a huge part of a solarpunk and a hopeful future. Yeah. So even with those three children's examples of Australian screen culture, I think it's obvious that we've got that, again, like tinkering, creating, problem-solving side to our culture that would be so helpful and could lead us towards that solarpunk future. Yeah. But it's more than just kids shows.
Yeah. Yes, so I was going to bring up Mad Max. And this, if you've seen Mad Max and know about the Mad Max world, doesn't sound solarpunk at first, but there's something about it that is kind of solarpunk, which I'll get into.
And Isabel's been itching for this throughout the whole season. Like Mad Max keeps coming up anytime we want to talk about solarpunk. So I'm glad we can finally do it in the Australia episode.
Yes. Yeah. So we did talk about it in again in our Future Cars episode from last season, and also our solarpunk systems episode from this season, I believe. But yeah, Mad Max, it's a dystopian future that's the opposite of solarpunk, kind of. And it often comes up in conversations about it. And yeah, Mad Max is such a huge part of Australian screen culture. It's also an example of something called diesel punk, which is to do with the car and road culture. But it has pockets of solarpunk in it, and if you blink, you'll miss it. And
but it's there.
It's there. It's something called the Green Place, which parts of were actually shown in the Furiosa prequel movie, which is the most recent Mad Max movie. And it's this place with lots of greenery, peaceful community, and renewable energy. So it's got lots of wind turbines in the background when it's shown for like the 30 seconds that it's on screen for. And it's basically in stark contrast to the rest of the grungy Mad Max world. And it's the utopian setting that the characters are searching for in Mad Max Fury Road. So yeah, you have to really pay attention to notice it, but it's there. And that's quite interesting that there is that sort of solarpunk vision.
And that's the aspiration. That's where they're all heading.
Exactly. And that's aspiration. And we wanted to bring it up because there's something special about these Australian utopias / dystopias kind of that storytellers and audiences keep coming back to. And I think part of it is because we have the outback, which is a kind of ready-made setting for that post-apocalyptic survival type of story, and that's the dystopian angle. But then the hope part of these stories, I think, comes back to our connection to the sun, to the bush, and knack for innovation, which I said I was going to expand on a bit more earlier, because in Australia, we invented Wi-Fi, we helped with the invention of Google Maps, we invented cochlear implants, and that's not even touching on all of the incredible enduring First Nations inventions and knowledges.
Yeah, for sure. So where does this leave us kind of at the end of this episode? And also this episode ends our whole season on Solarpunk.
Yeah.
So I guess throughout this episode, we've spoken about the conditions that are here in Australia, the conditions that continue to be made, and that could lead us to that more solarpunk future. We've got some serious truth-telling to do for reconciliation, and we've got incredible conditions for a sustainable energy future. And our communities are creating cultures and technologies that welcome in this hopeful and sustainable future. So we're really primed for good, and we've just got a little bit more work to get us towards that more hopeful future, that more hopeful tomorrow. And this is a pattern that we've explored throughout this whole season. We see across the whole globe. It's in our media, it's in our technological developments, our imaginings of a positive future, our dreaming, our economical realities, and the communities we're looking to build together. So really, there are so many good things to come already in this world, some being developed, some more to go with. And ultimately, we hope that this season of Cyburst has given all of our listeners some really great context for the good in this world and the better future we're building.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's actually a lovely way to sort of wrap up the main content of this episode, and a great way of ending the Solarpunk season that we've done, a total of 12 episodes. Live audience are getting to see this before it comes out a couple of months
Sneak
ahead.
peek.
Yeah. But something else that we do in Cyburst podcast episodes is the good news bit.
So every episode we wrap up with 2 good news stories. So Isabel, for the final time this season, can you share some good news with us?
Yes, I absolutely can. And remember how the last few you picked multiple because you couldn't pick one? I've done the same thing.
So many good things. It's really nice.
But they all link back to the same sort of news article and story in one. So there's an overarching story here. But my good news story for the final episode of season 3 is about how several university students from Sydney, so local in Australia, have designed innovative and, might I say, solarpunk products that help tackle climate change in the wake of the world's hottest 3 years to date and the sweltering 42-degree Celsius temperatures experienced by Western Sydney in February this year. So that was sort of the context of these designs. So the first solution is called Terracol.
Okay.
And it was designed by University of Technology Sydney student Isabella Bucknell. It's a 2.2 metre vertical cooling system that you attach to streetlights to passively cool the surrounding area. So how it works is that it collects rainwater, and then this rainwater is released by a sensor when temperatures reach between 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. And then the water, once it's released, it makes its way into 4 chambers made of clay, which is a highly porous material, and it can naturally cool the surrounding area by about 6 degrees. And then it also, the system has another layer of cooling that absorbs hot air during the day and releases it later at night.
So that passive cooling element. Love it.
So super handy. And the student designer, Bucknell, estimates that with large-scale manufacturing, it could take about 1 to 3 weeks to make, so pretty quickly.
That's really quick, yeah.
And she's considering pitching it to councils and governments, and I think she should go for it because it's a great system. The second solution. Bucknell's fellow design student, Freya Rollo, she has created something called Luft.
That's a good name.
Yes. which is an air purification device that can be attached to the walls of train platforms.
Oh, well, they need it.
Yes, it's made of environmentally friendly materials like aluminium, and it contains fans and carbon-activated filters, which are very easy to maintain, and they filter pollution from the air. Another cool thing about Luft is that it has a fire retardant inside, so it can self-extinguish if needed, which is really important.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's cool, but also great because it meets the New South Wales train station safety standards for any device that's in there. And the system can filter about 300 meters square of air per hour, which Rollo says is equivalent to around 700 breaths of clean air and creates around a 2 to 3 meter bubble of fresh air for commuters.
Nice.
She also says that you can lean against it, or congregate around it as you would on a normal train platform. And while you're doing that, it's purifying the air. So it's multi-purpose. So not only is it purifying the air, but you can also use it as something to like lean on if you need a bit of a rest. And the last one, if both those inventions weren't good news enough for you, another group of students from the University of Sydney have designed something called the Canopy Project for bus stops in Western Sydney that lack shelter and seating and shade. And so what they've done is created a 3-tiered solution to fit different space requirements because there's lots of different bus stops that have different needs depending on the location.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is what they call the canopy design, which is a larger bus stop with a solar panel, native plants on the top and behind, a bladeless ceiling fan, an interactive display, a micro library.
In the bus stop?
Yes. And seating made of hempcrete, which is a mixture of lime, hemp hurd, and water, and recycled timber. And one of the students said that it's designed so, quote, even if they're not trying to catch a bus somewhere else, there's large enough spaces and amphitheatre-style seating for them to sit down, relax, and engage with one another community-wise.
Cool.
So love that. So that's sort of the largest design that they have. The second one is the slightly smaller sapling design, which has a solar panel, also has a bladeless ceiling fan and an artwork by a local artist. So love that. And then the third and smaller solution is the seedling design.
The names are so nice.
I know. And this one has a button-controlled adjustable shade with a solar panel as well as a circular seat, again with an interactive display attached where possible. And I love the idea in all of these inventions, so not just the bus stop ones, but also the train station one and the streetlight one, of adding to already existing technologies and infrastructure. So like the streetlights, like the train stations, like the bus stops, because it's like, hey, here's infrastructure we already have. So why not find ways of upgrading and enhancing it rather than building giant new systems, which is why I'm saying they're all pretty solarpunk ideas.
Yeah. And I love these are all coming from Australian students as well.
Yes.
Such a good way to add to this, the end of this Australian solarpunk episode. I'm going to take us for my good news story in the more pop culture direction. And my good news story is one that I'm so happy to end our deep dive into solarpunk science and popular culture on.
Yeah, it was perfect timing, wasn't it?
And the good news story is that the current fictional mainstream story in our media right now is a hopeful science fiction story. It's Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be a completely spoiler-free description of it. So if you haven't read it, listened to it, watched it, I highly recommend, and you can do this without this, you can do that after this, and I'm not going to spoil anything major, but I am going to set the scene for you. So the sun is dimming and dying. The climate crisis we all currently face is being accelerated really quickly, but in the other direction, because soon the Earth is going to be too cold for human survival. But this is ultimately a story of hope, of humans across the world coming together and to solve this really big problem. Project Hail Mary is a story of remarkable friendships, of really like odd encounters, which I won't go into, and of a Hail Mary mission to save humanity. It's funny, it's emotional, it's clever, it's so deeply human, and unlike so many in the space genre, it really equally values non-human life with human life. And that's incredibly solarpunk too. Mm-hmm. But why is this story being popular a good news story? Because attention, critical reviews, and popular cultural consciousness is being directed towards a science-based story of hope. And that's really powerful. So Rotten Tomatoes gives this movie a 94% critic score. It's got a 96% verified audience score. It's amazing. The soundtrack's amazing. The visuals are amazing. It's made for IMAX, so you get more of the screen than less of the screen. It's grossed $300 million USD at the box office already. And I want to talk about how this wasn't an overnight success. So this is from the author and creator of The Martian, which was extremely popular. Yeah. And Ryan Gosling, who plays the lead in the movie, he held the rights to option this as a movie for years before the movie, right as the book came out. And this was really intentional. And there's this quote we've already shared from him on our socials, but I want to immortalize it into this recording. So Ryan Gosling says, "I think that's what's so special about this film and why people are having such an emotional connection to it. It's like we've been so saturated with dystopia and future narratives for the last decade to the point where it feels almost inevitable at this point. Then you have Andy sort of reminding us through his work that human beings are always making the impossible possible. That's kind of our thing." Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And this is good news because whilst not, a outright solarpunk story, it builds on the trend of hopecore in popular movies, such as the recent 2025 Superman. We're seeing these worlds of color, of hope, of interspecies agency, of human collaboration and more. And ultimately, I think for us, this is really where we really want to see popular media trending. And it's great to report that this is becoming a reality. Yeah. At the end of all these versions of hopeful popular culture we've been exploring together.
Yeah. Thanks, Elle. I think that was honestly the perfect good news story to end this season on. And great timing for that movie coming out, and the fact that in pop culture people are finally talking about telling those more hopeful stories and starting to move away from those dystopian visions, because I think we are a little bit over it.
Yeah, I'm over it. I'm also over really like dark movies where you can't see anything happening on screen. Yes. Give me color. I want to see the joy. I want to leave the movie theater feeling hopeful about my future, and that's what this movie really did for me.
Yeah. And I think on that note, it's time for questions for our listeners to have a think about. So we'd love to know, what's solarpunk about where you live? How could it be more solarpunk?
Yeah, and we want to know, after listening to this episode, what's the most Australian solarpunk thing you can think of? So if you had to pick a number one, what would it be for you?
Yeah, so as always, let us know on our socials at sci_burst or via our Gmail, sciburstpodcast@gmail.com. And also, this is our last episode of our solarpunk season, but very importantly, we have plans to keep making more solarpunk content in different formats, especially on YouTube, maybe in the gaming space.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. Let us know if you have any ideas and perhaps what you would like to see. And regardless, Cyburst will return as a podcast shortly after this season. And we just want to remind you to stay nerdy, stay curious, stay hopeful, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, we will.